Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Triangle of Sadness, starring Harris Dickinson, Charles B. Dean, and Woody Harrelson, directed by Ruben Ostlund. Now, before I get into this movie, I saw half of this in theaters. I was kind of disturbed by a couple of audience members that were talking out loud for about half the movie, and I thought, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna leave. So I didn't. I didn't wish for my money back. I just got out of there and thought the movie wasn't very good, and haven't looked back since. So let's see if I did the right thing or the wrong thing. Let's get into it. We open with a male model gig as Carl, played by Harris Dickinson, as I reviewed this actor before in Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, and The King's Man, both mediocre to bad films, as he is good in this movie, while some of other male models get their pictures taken and auditioning as a male model, while the opening credits are going for production team first and then the cast, which is pretty damn random. And as Carl is modeling, he is asked to control his triangle of sadness to his on his face, which makes sense. And this is a well shot scene, as this movie is well made, but in my opinion, like Tar, it takes way too long to get to the fucking point of the movie. We get a first chapter of Carl and his girlfriend Yaya, played by Charles B. Dean, who just died earlier this past year, as she and Carl are at a nice restaurant and they get into an argument about who gets to pay the check, and it goes on for quite a while, and it gets boring after a while. And take it to the car, to the hotel elevator, to the room, and eventually forgive each other. And now, first of all, if you're a couple and you have to pay the bill all the time, then you can say something, but this is the first time we've seen this couple, so I don't see how they make a big deal out of it after the first time, which can be pretty damn obnoxious. In my opinion, and this sequence takes way too long, and it is completely overwrought, and it makes me think they're terrible people to be following at all. We get a yacht or maybe a cruise ship where they get their food, sauces, and drinks, and a pep talk from Paula, who's the director of the ship, and suggests for her workers to say yes, sir, yes, ma'am to anything, even if it's impossible, which doesn't make sense. Carl takes photos of Yaya on her phone, and I swear to God, she takes a shit ton of pictures, which is can be a bit too much. While a crewman takes off his shirt, says hello as Carl gets jealous because she smiles and says hello back, which is any boyfriend being overprotective of his girlfriend, sure. And did we need to see that? No. And I will say this movie is too long. It needed about 30 minutes in the editing room, in my opinion. Carl does go to Paula and complains about the crewman taking off his shirt, and he comes back after briefly leaving to buy an engagement ring for Yaya. And Paula goes to the captain, played by Woody Harrelson, about take, taking off with the other passengers as he doesn't feel well. And we move on to the first day of sailing, and Carl and Yaya sit across from a couple where the guys sell shit. That's what he says in the movie. I'm not making that up, which was kind of amusing. And we also meet Clementine and Winston, as well as non speaking Therese or Therese. I don't even know if I'm saying the name right, as it's part of her disability, which is which was greatly shot. And I guess these characters are kind of obnoxious, but they're developed pretty well. We move on to a party where Yaya and an older lady, whom for the life of me I can't remember the name of, taking a picture of a random man asking for a photograph of him while his drink and with his drink, I mean, and they decide to take a picture with him, so he buys them a drink because he's fucking rich, which is what he says to them, which was interesting. The captain has to dress up for the captain's dinner, but says he can do it a different day, and I'm thinking he's getting high, as Woody Harrelson has that as a habit, as I saw on the TV recently, which kind of cracked me up in a non amusing way. And I feel like nothing is happening in this movie, and that feels pointless for a movie plot. An elderly lady asks for a crew lady named Alicia to go for a swim, and asks all the crew members to go for a swim, and they do while Paula doesn't want them to, as she tells another captain they're not allowed to, and they go through the water slide, and the other captain shows a guest around the captain's bridge, which is an awful scene in my opinion. The captain's dinner begins and greets everyone there while the ship rocks back and forth, and while serving dinner, everybody in the room gets sick and throws up because they possibly got seasick. Now, to be fair, I was on a cruise recently and it did rock back and forth at times, but I almost got seasick, but I got used to it, and this scene is completely prolonged, and I felt like I get it. People are seasick while on this cruise. While the captain didn't, which was an interesting choice, I guess. We're still going back and forth, and we get an announcement that the ship is going under while the captain and the elderly man that sells shit are playing a drinking game and joking around, which is a terrible thing to joke about while drunk. And this is a terrible, terrible scene. The ship is about to sink while rock music is playing in the background, which is a bad idea. And the captain with the elderly man that sells shit has the door locked, and the crew members knocking on the door to try to barge in, and as they do, and Woody Harrelson has done tremendous performances in better movies than this thing, as he is absolutely terrible in this film. Some pirates approach the cruise ship while it blows up, and a few hours later, we're on an island with almost everyone on the ship. And this movie is tragically bad. And I have to spend one more hour with these goddamn characters, and we're already at the point where in the theater I walked out of this movie. And I never looked back, and when I fell asleep, and I forgot to tell you, I watched it again before I took notes for this, and I did fall asleep, as this is becoming a mess of a movie. Everybody on the island is scared while hearing noises uncomfortable for the way they're stuck on stranded on the island while others are in mini boats, and everyone on the ship gets food and water to survive and make a fire at night and decides to work together in order to survive and discuss who's the captain with Abigail. And I'm just getting very bored at this point in the movie, which is becoming the most difficult problem, as this movie, like Tar, drags quite a bit. But this is the worst. This is a little bit worse than Tar, in my opinion. Carl and another guy named Nelson ate some food while keeping watch, and Abigail tells them to find their own food. And if they didn't eat it based on what they said, and wasn't Abigail being a little too rashly while punishing Carl and Nelson by not getting them food and watching everybody else eat, which is a bullshit thing to do from the get-go. And I get the impression Carl and Yaya are going to break up at this point in the movie, as they were bad to each other throughout the movie, as she was begging Carl to not do anything inappropriate to anybody, including women, and they are eating other people's food while they're the worst couple I've seen in this whole damn film. Everyone works together on getting food and killing things like donkeys off screen, which is fine, but I'm not a fan of abusing animals on screen, which this movie didn't do, so I'll give it a point for that. Yaya sees Carl's hand behind another woman's chair while Yaya kisses one of the crew members while Carl sneaks off with another woman, whom I'm guessing is Abigail, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? As this movie is a fucking mess. Like, I don't care anymore. Yaya wants to go hiking on her own, and Abigail insists on going with her as she wants to tell Yaya about Carl and her as a couple. And this score in that scene was very distracting. Like, why was it there in the first place? And it's also repetitive until it stops by the next scene, and someone finds one of the characters we've been following, and I get the impression Abigail and Yaya are hallucinating. As they saw something, and Abigail kills Yaya with a rock, while Yaya asks to be her assistant, and Carl runs to find them. And I thought, what the fuck kind of climax is that, or ending for that matter, as it was incomplete. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 3.9 out of 10. The movie is a little too long with a very pointless plot, and this movie shouldn't have existed, nor should it have an Oscar nomination for Best Picture or Best Director, as I don't believe it's going to win either one, as this made me fall asleep versus walk out because nothing was happening for about half the film, as it was boring. Don't get me wrong, though, this movie is well shot and well made, and that's all it's got. But nothing else, which is why, in my opinion, this might be the weakest movie in the Best Picture category of this year. I did try so hard to like this movie, but I either walked out of the theater and never looked back, or did I fall asleep? So, again, the weakest of the Best Picture nominees. So that's why it's a non recommendation. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time we will be back with women talking. And until then, and the Oscar goes to.